Hello everyone, and welcome back to Seed Time and Harvest. We are again in the kitchen today, and I'm going to be showing you just how you can extend your potato harvest, having potatoes that were freshly harvested from your garden for a long period. Stay tuned. So here we have everything that we're going to need to process our potatoes. I have my quart jar. They've already been cleaned, sterilized. We're going to be using the cold packed method today, which means I'm going to cut my potatoes, put them in the jar, ladle hot water over them, and then I'll put them in the canner. In addition to our potatoes, I have some bay leaves, parsley, basil, salt, and garlic powder. All right, so our potatoes have already been washed, they've already been scrubbed, and while you're cleaning your potatoes, if you realize that you have any blemishes whatsoever, you can go ahead and just cut those off. I need to retake. The items that we're going to be using for this video today, we have potatoes, bay leaves, we have parsley, basil, salt, and garlic powder. If you have any blemishes on your potatoes, you can just cut it off. In addition to the items that are on my table here, I have my kettle with my hot water, my lids in also a container with warm water, and my pot on the stove. Now I have my pot will hold 7 quart jars. Now, if you want to use the pint jars, that's fine. But with potatoes, the bigger jar, the better it is. So I'm going to go ahead and start packing my jars right now. Again, I'm using the cold pack method. So these are pretty small. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut my potatoes, put them in the jar. I'm going to cut them in half and then cut them in half again. All right. And then we're just going to fill up this jar. What I find is that a lot of videos or even books that you may read may tell you to do blanching method first, so that you'd blanch your potatoes and then you will prepare them. But potatoes are so soft, and in my experience, when I do that, like blanch them and then have to cook them again for 40 minutes, you end up with mashed potatoes, right? And if you want to do mashed potatoes, that's fine. Or if you want to do potato soup, cream potato soup, that's fine. But if you want to have some texture on your potatoes after you've processed them, then I find the cold pack method is best. And this is the same for the Yukon potato as well as the red potato. Like the Idaho potato will stand fairly easy with the pressure if you were to blanch them before, but not the same with this one, okay? So they've already been scrubbed, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to pack about 7 jars, which will fit in my pot. I need a 1-inch headspace with my potatoes. So if you're packing your jar and you're realizing that maybe 1 or 2 are sticking out the top, then just go ahead and move those to a different container, okay? And it's very simple to process potato. This is actually one of the first things I've pressure canned. At first I was really nervous getting into canning, but you know, after reading the books, getting some more information online, I became more confident to be able to process potatoes. And it's very easy. Just cut them up, put them in a pot, and allow the steam to do the rest, okay? I want to mention too, it's very important to cut your potatoes. If you have really tiny potatoes, some people will pack them whole, but I'm pretty sure many of us have cooked potato before, and you find that it looks good on the outside, but when you cut it, it has those little dark lines going through. So when you cut them, you avoid putting any bad potatoes in your jar. Another thing is I don't peel potatoes, especially red potatoes. It has a lot of nutrients in the skin, so I wouldn't peel my potatoes if I am processing this method. Now, if you want clean potatoes and you want to peel them, that's on you, that's fine, but you know, you don't necessarily have to. So again, it's just repeating the same step. I'm going to put about, each quart jar will hold about 2 pounds of potatoes, and I had about 3 10-pound bags of potatoes here. So I will fill 7 jars and have a little bit left over. Maybe I can process another 7 jars later. But if you want a good gauge of how much potato will fit in the jar, 2 pounds is a good place to start. 2 pounds per quart. Okay? And you can do so much with these after you've preserved, put them in your pantry, and later on you're ready to use them. Okay? So 3 down, 4 to go. Potatoes are a really good crisis food. If you know, whether you want to store fresh potato or processed potato, that's a very good item to have on hand because there's so much you can do with it, and it will actually store over a year on the shelf. Now, if you have these potatoes and you just want to put them in your pantry or anywhere in your kitchen rather, you'll find that within a few days they will start to sprout if they're not stored properly. But once you figure out a good way to store your potatoes, these are excellent crisis food. And I'll be back when I'm done cutting all these potatoes. So as I'm cutting my potato, what do you notice? This is not white, but it's green. Green potatoes are actually very toxic if you consume a lot of it. How does it become green, you may ask? Well, from the gardening perspective, when your potato plant is growing, usually you have that luscious green comes up, and then the tuber stays underground where it expands, and then you will have your potatoes. Now, if the tubers are expanding underground, sometimes it will push up out of the ground and it will get that sun exposure. That's what causes it to become green. To avoid this, the gardener will simply mound the potatoes. So you're going to get soil and cover your potatoes up so that you reduce that sun exposure. Now, if you say, oh, well, I just ate some green potato last night, is that bad for me? It's not going to be bad. You have to consume a lot of it, and it will make you sick. So just be careful. And that's why cutting your potatoes is very good so that you can actually see what you're putting in your jar. Another thing I want to mention is storing potatoes, root cellar versus canning. You can store potatoes in a root cellar for a long time, up to a year. To do this, the best way to do this is to avoid putting it close to any form of onions or apples, because those things actually have chemicals that will cause your potatoes to sprout. So you would not wash your potato after you've harvested them. When you're going to store it in a root cellar, you're just going to harvest your potatoes, allow it to cure for about a day or two, not in direct sunlight, maybe in your garage or somewhere that's covered. You cure it for about a day or two, causes the skin to harden. You're not going to wash it, so you're just going to brush off the dirt, and then you can store it in your root cellar. That way you can get a good year's supply storage for potatoes. However, if you are canning your potato and storing these canned potatoes in your root cellar, you can actually keep them for over 2 years. Now, unless, you don't have a lot, but if you do have a good amount, 2 years, if you have a little bit, you may go through it faster. All right, so I'm almost done. I'm not gonna put the green potatoes in my jar. And I don't want to cut my potatoes too small because I don't want mashed potatoes. Of course, the smaller the potato, the more exposure it is to the water, and it will cook faster. All right, so just be mindful of that as you're packing your jar. And we're just gonna stuff them in. Try to find that 1-inch headspace. You can knock them down, shake them up if you like to. I have one more. Okay, and I'm on to my last jar. With the jars, the wide mouth or the regular mouth, it's totally up to you. I find that they hold the same amount of potatoes. The wide jar just basically gives you a lot more space to pack things in, but it's the same amount, all right? And I actually have 2 wide mouth that I'll be using today. Just whatever you have handy, make use of, you know, whatever your resources, so that you can have food stored for a time of crisis. And that's the idea of me sharing this with you, so that you can get some jars, whatever you can find, clean them up, get them sterilized, and put some food in them. You know, don't just have your jars sitting at home collecting dust. Do some things with them. Instead of having your potatoes spoil and start to sprout on you, pack them in a jar so that you can have food for later. Okay? One thing I should have done first, I should have put my bay leaf in my jar. But let's see how I can maneuver getting these leaves in here. Okay. My jars are packed with potatoes. The next step is to get my seasonings in. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to get the bay leaves in, okay? All right, since my bay leaves are fairly small, I find bay leaves and potatoes go really well together. I'm just gonna put 2 leaves on top, okay? If it were the bigger one, then I may have to figure out how I can get them in the side. But once the water is in there, then I will be able to shake them around. I'm just gonna put 2 leaves in each jar. The bay leaf smells so good. If you like cooking beans with bay leaf, it's really, really good. All right, my bay leaves are in. The next thing I'm going to add to my jar, I'm gonna have 1 teaspoon of parsley. This is dried parsley, just a teaspoon of parsley in each jar. Again, this is herbed potato, and whatever seasoning you like, you can add them to your potatoes. I like parsley, I like oregano, Italian seasoning, these things. I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of garlic. This is garlic powder, rather. Some good flavor. Did you know that you can can soup? You can can soup, you can can veggies, whatever it is that you have, even fruits. You can can. Of course, the method is different, but you can. I'm gonna also add a teaspoon of salt. This is white sea salt. You can use kosher salt. It will help to retain the color, and it will act as a preservative. And then I'm gonna use ½ teaspoon of basil. That's a heaping teaspoon, ½ heaping teaspoon of basil. In all my jars. Okay, the next step, I'm gonna get my funnel and I'm gonna pour water over all my jars, leaving about 1 inch headspace. So I have my water in my kettle. I'm gonna cover my jar, leaving an inch headspace. Okay. Remember, we're gonna use this also, not only does it give you your headspace measure, but turn it upside down and you can get a nice debubbler here. Make sure I have sufficient water in all my jars. Can use it to pack down my potatoes. I can add a tad bit more water in here. All right, and then let me just finish this one up by putting my lid and my band. Of course, every time I process any form of food, I get new lids. They're very inexpensive, and for safety measure, it's best to have new lids, okay? So I'm gonna show you what it looks like in a second, but let me just finish packing all these jars. And I guarantee you, once you get comfortable with canning, whether it be water bath canning or pressure canning, you're gonna do it a lot. I remember the very first time I got a dehydrator. I took everything out of the freezer and I dehydrated them and I put them in mason jars, and my freezer was empty. I was like, oh man, this is amazing. Such a good space saver. I don't have to worry about anything spoiling. It's just a good habit. It's very good to be able to preserve food, ensure that you have provisions for not only you, but your family and the strangers within thy gates. Debubble, check our space, pop on our lid. Oh, I forgot something very, very important. It's a good thing I remembered before I put them in my pot. One of the most important things you want to do to make sure that you have a very good seal, I'm going to pop these off and put the lids back in the water. I forgot to clean the rim of my jars. Can you imagine? So I'm going to put my lids back in the water. I'm going to use a clean paper towel and make sure I clean my lids thoroughly, because if there is any food particles on the rim of my jar, that will prevent it from sealing, okay? So I get a nice clean lid and I'm gonna reattach. Thank you, Lord, for helping me to catch that. All right, so we are back on track. The water is fine. If there is water there, then that's not a problem. You just want to make sure that you have no food, no herbs, no salt. There is nothing there to prevent you from getting a good seal. Okay? All right, so water, and it's the same process. It's the same process repeating. Water, debubble, maintain in that 1 inch headspace, and wipe, seal, and you are good. The colors inside the jar is amazing. The contrast between the green, the white, the dried herbs. It's really pretty. Okay. One thing I want to share with you is that if you are in an area where you have very, very hard water, you can add vinegar to your pot. That one is not working out. You can add vinegar to your pot, and that will prevent the hard water from getting that stain on the outside of your jar, so you can have really pretty clean jars. If you don't want to add vinegar to your water, not that it's going to affect anything, it's not within the contents of your jar, you just can wash your jars after a 24-hour period of them sitting there. Okay? Actually, you need to take one out. Get a little more water in. Okay. All right, we are almost done. 2 more jars to go. Okay. It's always good to have backup hot water. If you run out of water in your kettle, just have an extra pot of hot water going so you can restock your kettle if needed. Okay. We have the 1/2 inch headspace. Clean the ring of your jar. And when you put your band on, you don't want it to put it on super tight, okay? So just finger tight. Because once you're finished preserving, once you're finished processing your food, you may want to take those bands off. It's not necessary, all right, because a seal would have already been formed. So you don't need the band. So finger tight is good, okay? So you can take that off when you are done. Smells really good, and it's not even cooked yet. And it's very, very easy. It's not hard at all. I think the hardest part is the mental aspect of it, wondering if you're doing it right. But once you're following your ball canning guide, you have a proven recipe, then you are good to can your food. And that's it. I'm just gonna shake it up so I have all my seasoning going all throughout my jar. All right, and I don't know if you can see how this looks, but it looks very pretty. See the parsley, the greening of the parsley, and then the bay leaf in there. I was able to sink that bay leaf, so it's gonna cook underneath. All right, so I'm just gonna give all these jars a nice shake, and whether you put the seasoning at the bottom or at the top, you can just give it a nice tumble before you put them in your canner so that your seasoning is distributed all throughout your jar. All right, as I mentioned before, my pot is actually boiling. I have my water in there. I have my canning rack in. Very important, you want to make sure that you have a canning rack in your pot so that your jars are not in direct contact with that heat. And then one by one, I'm going to put all 7 of my jars in my pot. With pressure canning, you want to bear in mind that it's not necessarily the water that's going to preserve your food, but the steam in the canner is going to help to preserve your food, okay? So you want to build up that steam. I would suggest perhaps something very important, that prior to you starting your canning, you want to check your elevation. All right, with my elevation, I'm below 1,000 feet. So I will process my food at 10 pounds of pressure. If you're 1,001 feet all the way up to 10,000 feet above sea level, then you are going to be processing at 15 pounds of pressure. Okay, so you want to check your elevation prior to you starting the process of canning your food. Okay, all my jars are in my pressure canner. The next step is to put my lid on. So my lid is good. My lip is nice. You can hear that. It's nice and loose. So this is not going to stop me from getting a good seal on my canner. My vent hole is clear. There's nothing obstructing it. I also have my rubber on. So I'm going to put my lid on my pot. Okay, notice I do not have the weight on. So the weight is going to remain off. Now, just to mention, when you use your pressure canner, you want to have at least 2 quarts of water in your pot. As I mentioned before, you're not preserving using water, but steam. So 2 quarts is sufficient for your pressure canner. Unlike water bath canning, where you need that 1-inch headspace above the jars, it is not necessarily needful with pressure canning. The lid is on the pot, but my weight is off. A very important step here. My fire is on medium high, okay, and I need my pot to start to boil, starts to build up pressure. How I know my pressure is built? Because my safety valve is going to pop. And I will see steam venting through this vent pipe. Once my vent pipe starts venting, it's gonna vent for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we're gonna come back and we're going to put the weight on top of our pot. Very important. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. I feel like everybody's watching for it to pop. Did you see it? It popped. Okay, so now that I have my canner going, I have a steady flow of steam. I'm gonna start my timer on for 10 full minutes, okay? So this has to vent for 10 full minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to put our gauge on our weight actually on our pot. So cook time is about 10 minutes. Very nice. Okay, so our time is up. We have a steady vent of steam. We're gonna put our weight on. Just be careful because of course the steam is hot. Now what's gonna happen is immediately you can see my gauge has started to go up. I am looking for my elevation, 10 pounds of pressure, and we're gonna go for 40 minutes, okay? So that's for my elevation. I'm gonna restart my timer for 40 minutes. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I hit that 10 pounds of pressure, and then I'm going to put my timer on for 40 minutes. Your elevation may be different, so check your recipe. Anything greater than 1,001 feet above sea level, then you have to put it to 15 pounds of pressure. Okay, so letting the pot do its thing. My stove is still on medium high. As soon as my gauge hits 10 pounds of pressure, I'm gonna restart my 40 minutes. If you're using quart jars, then your time is going to be less. So this is where your recipe comes in handy. This is where the difference between a pressure canner stovetop versus an electric pressure canner comes in, because with the electric canner you're just going to pop everything in, plug it in, you put your settings together, and you can walk away. You can go do laundry, do dishes, or what have you. With the pressure canner on the stovetop, you have to basically babysit it. So I am almost at 10 pounds of pressure. Right about 10 pounds of pressure, I'm going to start my timer. Okay, so again, I need 40 minutes. So I'm going to put 40 minutes. Wait, 40 minutes, and my time starts now. Of course, with the stovetop, my stove being on high, my pressure is just gonna keep going up, okay? So to control that, you basically, I'm at 10.5 pounds of pressure right now, so I'm going to just turn down my stove. The pressure is already built in my pot, and it should stop at about 10, okay, so it's about a little over 10. It's gonna go back down because I turned my stove down to about 4, and you can adjust the setting on your stove to the temperature to keep that consistently at 10 pounds of pressure. You wanna watch it because you don't want it to fall below 10 pounds of pressure, because you need that pressure to kill whatever bacteria that's gonna cause your food to spoil, okay? Again, pressure canning for potatoes, maintain that 10 pounds of pressure. Another reason why you want to watch it is because you don't want to run away and the pressure builds up to 20, because then your pressure canner, it will explode, and that will not be good for you. So adjust your temperature on your stove, maintain that for about 40 minutes, and I will see you then. My stove is singing, our time is up. 40 minutes down, it smells amazing. I haven't even opened the pot and I can already smell the bay leaf. So let's just turn that off. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna turn our stove off and allow our pressure to go back down to 0 on its own. So we're not gonna touch the gauge, we're not gonna remove anything, we're not gonna shake our pot. We just have to wait now for our gauge to go back down to 0, and then we will come back and remove our weight. I'll see you then. Okay, it's almost time to take our jars out the canner. Our pressure gauge is down to 0, which is a good sign. The pressure has to go down a little bit. My safety gauge is not going down, which is letting me know that there is some pressure in this scanner. So I'm going to remove the pressure regulator or the weight for it to vent a little more. And once my safety gauge goes down, then I am ready to take my jars out. So we're gonna watch it and we're gonna listen. Can you hear it? It sounds so good. It smells so good. I'm excited. I like canning. All right, but again, if you wanna can some food, of course, you cannot use a regular pressure cooker at home. It's not the same. It has to have a gauge. It has to be able to hold your jars, and you have to be able to build up that temperature, okay, for you to safely kill all virus, all bacteria, whatever it is that's gonna be on your food that will cause them to spoil. All right, we wanna make sure that that's out. And our safety gauge is down. That means it's safe to open our canner. Now, before you open your canner, what you will do is you'll just let the seal pop on its own. So while I will twist my top, I'm gonna let the seal pop. So just wait a little bit. And very important, remember there is a lot of steam, a lot of pressure in this canner. When you lift your lid, lift it away from you because you don't want steam in your face. You don't want to lose any eyebrows with the steam. I don't think it's going to be enough to lose some eyebrows, but you don't want to cause any damage to your face. So lift the lid away from you. Also remember, there is hot water on this lid and you don't want it to drain on your foot. So here we go. It's so nice. It smells so good. And I'm gonna lift the jar and let you see that the pressure is so strong that I'm gonna take out the jars and I have to put them on a piece of cloth, okay? So you wanna not put your jars on any cold surface. Don't put them on the counter. All right, so ready, moment of truth. I just want you to see that the pressure is so strong in this jar. Can you see it? It's still bubbling. It's really still cooking. And that's why, you know, when you cut your potatoes, you don't want to cut them where they're so small that they're going to be basically overcooked. So we're going to gently take out all our jars. We're not going to clean them off. We're not going to shake them. We're just going to let them sit on our counter, all right, for at least 12 to 24 hours for them to really cool down. Once they have cooled, look at that, still bubbling. Once they have cooled, you can go ahead and wash them if you want. You can take the band off. You can really clean them up. Now, it will be good if you can get like the amber jars. They have the brown mason jars and the blue mason jars, because when you preserve your food in the clear jars, for adequate storage, you want to keep them in a dark area, okay? Because not only will light affect the coloration of your food, but it's also going to affect the nutrient availability, okay? So you, of course, the darker the jars, the better. But if you don't have dark jars, then you want to store these in like a dark closet or a root cellar, but an area where they're not, even house light, natural light, keep them away from natural and artificial light. All right, and you can tell that the redness is really gone. Right now it's just a pale pink, and you know, still bubbling, but the smell, it smells so nice. Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear the pop? One of them just popped. But we're gonna let them stay on our counter for 12 to 24 hours. The seal is gonna be created eventually. They will all pop. And then you can remove your bands, clean them up, label them, whether you want to put on dissolvable labels or you just want to use a Sharpie and label the contents, label the date, so that you have a nice rotation going on in your pantry. Everything is labeled. Whatever first in is always the first one out. And keep storing. I have a few more potatoes that I can do another batch, get some more jars, do another batch. But I must say, I am pleased with how these came out. I am excited to see what you're going to do with this video. How are you going to interpret it in your own way? Maybe can some potatoes, maybe can some carrots. Just do some wonderful things, okay? Don't let your produce stay at home and spoil. All right? And that is it for now. Thank you so much for joining us on Seed Time and Harvest. Please share this information with as many people as you can so that we can all be ready for a time of crisis, a time even where we will not be able to buy and sell. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. Again, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Seed Time and Harvest. Happy jarring. Take care. It popped. I like it.